Hi there and welcome to Capital View. Former NDA Minister Arun Shourie has strongly targeted the Modi government, saying that it is directionless. Is Mr Shourie's a case of sour grapes, or is he putting out what is considered constructive criticism? To debate that question, joining me on this episode, senior journalists Ajoy, Bose and Neerja Chowdhury, and economist and commentator Surjit Bhalla. Thanks everyone very much indeed for being here. Neerja Chowdhury, first across to you. A case of sour grapes on the part of Mr Arun Shourie, or is it very constructive criticism, and is he reflecting what a lot of people actually think?
I think so. I think he's resonated with a lot of people who've been saying that's what we've been expressing. Point number one, sour grapes, I don't think motive or substance. You can target the motive and say, okay, he wasn't finance minister, he wasn't made one of the four given heavy ministries which was expected. He was speaking before the Modi government took over as if he was going to be finance minister. I think we need to go to the substance of the points he's made one by one.
Exactly this time last year, he was giving interviews to all journalists, including myself, giving a kind of blueprint that Mr Modi has to follow, and in fact saying that Modi is the man India needs. Exactly a year later, he's now saying that there's so many things wrong with Mr Modi.
My main takeaway from the kind of language which Arun Shourie used in this interview, the kind of harsh personal criticism, is that he's bold enough to do that, which to my mind means that for somebody like Shourie, who's a keen political observer, he's made up his mind that Modi is on his way down. Because otherwise, he would have never taken the risk of coming out with such sharp, harsh criticism.
Do you think he's taken a calculated risk, or is it simply an outburst?
Definitely not, in my opinion, an outburst. I think it's also unfair to label the Shourie's motives as one of sour grapes. What he said resonated with a lot of people. I agree with a lot of what he said. And, and some of us have been saying parts of it all along. And so therefore, I think now coming to the question of whether he's taking a big risk or not, I think if I remember his interview correctly, he was careful, and most likely in my view, because he believes that to be the case, not to criticize Modi as much, and really not much at all, rather than the team. The team having lost the plot. And he mentioned two particular individuals, Arun Jaitley and Amit Shah, who seemed to have lost the plot, and was very critical of them. And I think what was also very good is that he was very fair. He said in foreign policy, Modi has done very, very well.
Argument could be made that after all, Mr Modi has won this big victory for the BJP. His authority is unchallenged. He's like Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher. He's made his party electable. And so why should he not have that authority?
Well, he has the authority. He had the authority. It was his vote. Let's be very honest. The vote was not for the BJP. It was for Mr Narendra Modi personally. But to rule a country as diverse as India, and the feedback one is getting, my co-panelists may have more light to throw on this, but I go to Bombay quite often. The corporate world, the industry world is saying they feel the decision-making process slowing down. Now, if you concentrate power, if you haven't filled vacancies, and Sonia Gandhi now today is on the rampage via CVC, CIC, 3 public sector banks after SBI are headless. Now, these kind of decisions, if you delegate authority, if the ministers are not doing what they did earlier, bureaucrats have taken over, the PMO has become all-powerful, then this is a natural corollary.
But then the PMO was all-powerful even in Vajpayee's regime, wasn't it? Didn't Vajpayee also have a very, very powerful, dynamic PMO? What's the difference now? Is it that the ministers are completely...
Principal secretary, I wouldn't say only a PMO. Principal secretary.
When I compare Vajpayee's PMO with the Narendra Modi PMO, I think the big difference is Vajpayee had a Brijesh Mishra. There was a system in which the PMO was telescoped into the cabinet system of governance in various ministries. Today, the feedback which I'm getting is increasingly a certain sense of disorientation.
The other thing that Arun Shourie alluded to was simply the lack of talent in the cabinet.
2 points. First, in terms of the PMO being all-powerful and more powerful than ever before, I have strong disagreements with that because it doesn't explain what the Ministry of Finance has been up to. We had the MAT tax fiasco, which
Right.
is absolutely zero reason for it.
I want to just read out some lines from the Wall Street Journal, which I think we can quote here productively. India is acting like a rapacious banana republic. The finance minister doesn't seem to understand that capricious tax policy drives away the investment needed for Indian agriculture and manufacturing. Assuming he was serious about his campaign rhetoric, Mr. Modi either needs to bring his finance minister into line or replace him.
The finance ministry, from all appearances, has done a terrible job.
Right.
So therefore, but I think there's part of the blame is Modi's himself. When people elected him last year, they elected him that here was a man of action. And unfortunately, he hasn't, he's certainly been a man of action in foreign policy, but in domestic policy, allowing these things to happen, whether it's on retrospective taxes or the various things which we have talked about, and which Shourie also talked about in terms of the social disruption of this government. And Shourie had a very nice line. He said, listen, Modi tweets about Sania Mirza winning, and he doesn't tweet about some of the Neanderthal comments that some of his ministers make. Why can't he tweet on that?
The finance ministry doesn't have the kind of autonomy which it ever had. Today it is monitored.
Well, Jayant Sinha
today,
is there.
No, today it's
No, in
monitored.
the PMO.
In the PMO, I beg your pardon.
No,
With the finance
no,
ministry, right.
today it's monitored on a virtually hourly basis by a whole host of bureaucrats, hand-picked bureaucrats from Gujarat. Hand-picked bureaucrats. Let me tell you that the number of bureaucrats which have been pushed into the finance ministry on the recommendation of the Prime Minister. I mean, let's not make this mistake. Modi is nobody's fool. He knows that finance is going to either float this government or sink this government.
Right.
I think we are not being truly fair to Arun Jaitley, the finance minister, because after all, he's working under huge constraints. You look
Like
at
what?
look at GST. After all, they don't have.
What has that got to do with retrospective tax?
No, retrospective tax.
And what has that got to do with putting tax on subsidies?
No,
these are new decisions. This has nothing to do with
These are decisions
GST.
which have suddenly come today.
Yeah,
as
but
you say.
this was in the works for the last 3 months.
None of the decisions are being taken independently by Arun Jaitley.
These are not Arun Jaitley's
And
decisions.
remember,
These are not
Jaitley
Arun's
is
decisions.
probably the most talented and most experienced face in this government.
Yeah, but
Right.
Sagarika, to be fair to Shourie, I must say, I give this credit, it would have been very convenient for him to pass the blame on to just Arun Jaitley or Amit Shah. He has not done so. In no word,
No, but what he has said is that he says the inflation has not come down because of this government. Growth is not up because of this government. The only reason why coal auction was transparent was because of Supreme Court intervention. It's not even 2 lakh crore that you're going to get from coal auction. You're only going to get 6,000 crore as demonstrated by Ishan Bakshi and Nitin Sethi. Is he being a little unfair on the finance minister? Is Arun Shourie being
but
a
he's
little
being
unfair
but if
on
he's being
Arun
fair
Jaitley
or
by saying
unfair,
that he's not done anything right?
No, but Sagarika, we are still talking of the finance minister as if he's some separate
Separate from
entity,
the-
and that is not so. In today's government, Modi owns the finance ministry as much as any prime minister has before, if not more. I don't think Arun Jaitley or any bureaucrat in the finance ministry takes any decision without it being vetted.
Was Shourie's trenchant criticism of Jaitley unfair?
No, I want to register that I think on one count, and you read the quote, I think Shourie was unfair. For example, in terms of bringing the inflation rate down. And this is something that the media, etc., has also played up, because we observe that the oil prices have come down, and we observe that inflation has come down, and we tie it up the two together. There is considerable bit of evidence that this government, whether it's Modi or Jaitley or both, deserve a lot of credit for making it possible for the inflation rate to come down. And you know what? We can find this out very easily. You can do this exercise, even Ajoy can do this exercise, by looking at when the inflation rate came down and when the oil prices started to come down. So therefore, I think on that one, Shourie did exaggerate, and I think he was wrong to do so.
He was wrong.
The credit has to be given to this government for helping bring the inflation rate down substantially. They further got helped buy this, but I can say that there were several of us writing articles that listened the inflation well before the oil price started to decline, that inflation is declining and that the RBI is behind the curve and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of empirical evidence to substantiate that on the inflation side, on the subsidies side, on several counts, this government, including Mr. Jaitley, has done very well. Right. But what I can't explain is why is it when it comes to very straightforward, and this is part of the tension criticism, even more tension by the Wall Street Journal, how you can mess up on the retrospective tax, given that we had all gone through it. And I'm sure you had several programs, everybody else a program from the retrospective tax in 2012. How could they mess up
so are
in
you
2015?
Similarly disillusioned? I know that you were giving the benefit of the doubt to the Modi government and to Modi in particular.
Yes.
Are you today finding yourself as a supporter of Mr. Modi disillusioned like Mr. Shourie?
Yes, I would say
you are.
I still think there's hope, but no. No, clearly, look, the object of any supporter or any critic is to be objective.
Right.
And I think Shourie was very objective. I pointed out where I think he was in error, but he was very objective. And I think my role or my belief is one should give credit when it is due, and we should really put the blame on when it is due.
So this is time for course correction. It is time for this government to take these criticisms on board.
And because I want to emphasize that don't play with fire. And I think somebody had mentioned, if you get the economy messed up, you're really playing with fire with yourself, and obviously you're playing with fire as far as the country is concerned.
Right.
And I think that's where
let's just quickly switch focus back to the politics, and then we'll come back to the economics. And Neerja, you know, the notion of the leadership that Shourie talked about, he seemed to imply that the leadership is getting distinct from the cadres, it's getting distant from the cadres, that the cadres are increasingly finding the leadership arrogant. There's a kind of distance, this Trimurti, again, the allusions to that. Do you feel that the party is beginning to get even the politics wrong? Because we've seen the electoral result in Delhi. You've seen what's happened in West Bengal. You've seen what's happened in Farenda in UP.
Yeah, the by-elections
where the by-election, where the BJP has...
Delhi is another story.
Shift
as we found out.
But no, I just want to focus on whether the politics is also going wrong in addition to the governance.
I think that would be a generalization. The test case will be Bihar, which will decide whether Modi government sustains its momentum or, the things start to come apart. That is a very critical case. Delhi's been there. Delhi was, as he says, there are many factors responsible for Delhi. But certainly the language, say, that Amit Shah has used, we will uproot Trinamool from Bengal. And even Modi has used the Congress Mukt Bharat. Now, in a democratic polity, particularly when you want to take the opposition along, which they need to, you don't have the numbers in Rajya Sabha, your hands and feet are tied, you will have to speak a different language to take everybody along. And Modi was best placed, 282, such a huge mandate. He could have afforded to be very magnanimous, generous, reaching out to party, delegating authority, reaching out to the opposition, rather than, this kind of stridency in language that we have seen.
And has that backfired in Parliament particularly?
It has backfired.
Parliament is, I think, a perfect example, because I think they've bungled Parliament in a very obvious and very clumsy manner, and Neerja will bear this out, because they've allowed the opposition to regroup and in fact consolidate against them. And despite the fact that they knew perfectly well that they needed the Rajya Sabha support, they didn't have majority, they planned it very, very badly. But Sagarika, politically, when you ask this question, but what is the political impact of Shourie's interview? Please remember that the BJP, unlike the Congress, is fundamentally a democratic party. It seeks delivery by its own leaders. If they are unable to win Bihar, a lot of the problems which Shourie is mentioning now, and which we consider as being very frank and, which is coming out, this will start being articulated by other people as well.
Right.
So I think Shourie has positioned himself very well of being the first one to articulate these fears so openly and so
He's been the
sharply.
one to bell the cat.
Yeah,
He's
so
been the
openly and
first one to
sharply.
bell
From
the
within the
cat.
system.
That's a very important point.
He's
That this is
from the
Arun
system.
Shourie from within the system who's
And I
made
think
this
that is
point.
very significant.
Right. Let's
And
take
you'll
a short
never
break.
have that happen in the Congress party.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Let's take a short break at this point. Our panelists are unanimous that 1 year of the Modi government and the troubles have only just begun. Much more after the break. Welcome back to Capital View. Arun Shourie has attacked the NDA government, saying it is directionless. Our panelists here in the studio are agreeing with him. Let's turn it over to them. The other point about Neerja Chowdhury, about what he said about Julia Ribeiro, and we must listen to the anguish of Julia Ribeiro. Is that again something that Arun Shourie was right to flag?
He said that we cannot have economic advancement without stability and predictability.
Right.
And I think this kind of extreme language that we've seen come, love jihad and and the attack on the churches so openly justifying again and again. And what is very important, on the Prime Minister's silence. As he says, as you said, it's one thing to tweet.
Yes.
Sania Mirza winning something, but it's another thing to take a position, as he says, a moral position on these issues. With the Prime
Has
Minister,
that been a real failing?
And remember,
Lack of a-
investment, Sagarika.
Yeah.
If you have this kind of a conflict-ridden situation or a potential conflict-ridden situation, investors are going to think 100 times before they come to India.
Internationally, India was never ever considered a part of these very extreme fundamentalist conservative states. I mean, of course, the West does business with all kinds of states, much worse, who say much worse things than Ghar Wapsi and Love Jihad. But they're in a different category. India always was considered democracy. On human rights, despite some real horror stories, from the government side,
Right.
we were on the same page. So I think there's a certain disquiet across embassies, across Western embassies in Delhi, across many countries who thought that India was a part of
That the
their
government is
Western
not holding
liberal
the
ethos.
center. One thing I also want to flag, and this takes off from what Ajoy is saying, he spoke about Modi's nature.
Inclination to centralize powers is probably, and have his way, though he
But
does,
how is it different from Indira Gandhi?
It's
Wasn't
not.
Indira Gandhi
Of
the
course,
same?
Absolutely.
And Shourie, mind you, was very critical
But
of
I think,
Indira.
look, guys, let's be fair.
One
Indian-
other thing I just want to say,
I think
one thing that he does still say that he is the leader we are looking to.
He gave good marks to the government in foreign policy, and this goes on to say that with China as well as with Pakistan, particularly Pakistan, we've not been particularly steady.
Yeah, that's right.
So I found that whole thing was crafted by Shourie. He's a master propagandist, a master pamphleteer.
Sagarika, it would be a mistake to see this interview as anti-Modi. It is very good. You call constructive or non-constructive criticism. I think he wants Mr. Modi to do well, to, as you say, course correct, to take care of all these things that need to be remedied. And I think that's the spirit in which it should
be taken. It should not be
Yes.
taken. Do you think the BJP actually, reacted rather wrongly by saying he's a fair weather friend?
This was scathing criticism. And I think it was very mild, the kind of response they said, fair weather friend. Some people actually said that, listen, we have to listen to criticism. BJP is a party that incorporates criticism, unlike the Congress where you can't say anything. And, while we're on the authoritarian, I've said this before, I'll say it now. I think the previous 10 years of the UPA rule was authoritarianism of Sonia Gandhi. So a lot of the bad laws that got passed, and we are talking about retrospective tax over here and several others, was authoritarian. She did not brook any opposition.
I want to just come to the media point where Shourie says that the government is spending too much time managing headlines.
I think Shourie is making a very valid point, because I think part of the problem with the government approach to anything that is going wrong is that, the media is somehow responsible for giving it an unfavorable thing. And all we have to do is a communication problem, so much like what the Congress felt.
Maybe if they pass the GST, we'll be singing a different tune.
Right.
Because that will be a major legislative victory. But at the risk of repeating myself for the 10th time, muscular, this, that, people voted for that. People voted for action, people voted for policy.
But they're not getting it. They're not getting it. They're not getting it. Because, you know, it's not just Arun Shourie.
He will go down in history as possibly the best prime minister we've had.
One small thing I want to say, Sagarika, on the managing the headlines as opposed to getting on with policy. I think any government worth its salt should manage headlines.
Yeah.
You should manage
Absolutely.
headlines.
You're
I'm not saying
required
manage the media or pressurize the media or bring the media to heel. I'm not talking
Exactly.
about.
Right.
But getting favorable headlines, you know, today doing something and telling the media, briefing about it, what will tomorrow be headline, instead of leaving it.
But is there
That is
just too
intelligent.
much of a sledgehammer
very.
approach?
No,
is there
I
too
think
much of a sledgehammer
it's
approach?
not
Whether it's
either
Ford
or.
Foundation, whether it's Greenpeace,
Of course, that's a
whether
different
it's
thing.
going after NGOs. Now, do you think that also? Do you think
That
that
is another
also
thing why it's losing
is
ground.
detrimental
You know,
to freedom of expression and
yeah.
dissent?
And
Is
beef
that
bans.
also the issue?
And beef bans.
And the beef
And
bans.
bans on comedy shows. I mean,
Right.
this kind of
Those kind of
atmosphere.
things are
You
creating
think
a
a lot
sense
of
of
trouble.
disquiet,
Exactly.
you know, gunning for the NGOs, gunning for the media. But to say managing headlines, you know, that's intelligent communication.
In my view, what is a problem is what has been going on for the last 20, 25 years, 30 years perhaps, is that the government, the bureaucracy, the ones that comes up with retrospective taxes and this kind of Neanderthal thinking, that for various reasons, the best and the brightest no longer go into the government and have not been going into the government for the last 20, 30 years. So therefore, there is, I think, a genuine shortage of people,
Of
good
talented people across the board.
You know, I've always maintained, Sagarika, that those who've been closer to the Sangh, whether it was Mr. L.K. Advani and now Narendra Modi, will have more problems dealing with the Sangh because the expectations from them are that much more.
But Vajpayee
From
did it. Vajpayee
the
did it.
expectations of the Sangh were not there. They were irritated. Yes, they put pressure on him. You can't have Jaswant Singh as your finance minister. Within hours of being told that he will be finance minister, there was Mr. Yashwant Sinha taking over when Vajpayee first came to power. So those kind of things. But Vajpayee was, was able to navigate this very skillfully.
Yes, he
now,
was able
Mr.
to navigate
Modi,
Let me
Mr.
also
Modi is also a hardliner himself.
Arun Shourie is hugely admired by the RSS
Right.
as an independent intellectual.
Right.
In fact, he has very strong backing from sections of the RSS. So do not at all dismiss his RSS contacts. Let us not, I think, simplify or make this problem of the RSS and what is happening in terms of, because it's not necessarily that
Right.
the RSS as an organization which is doing all this. There are tendencies which, and that is why Narendra Modi has made a huge mistake in not cracking down right at the beginning at these tendencies. People feel
But as
emboldened.
Neerja saying, that's him.
Yeah.
He's from the same
Yeah,
family.
so that is
He can't
unfortunate.
crack down on his own
Support.
family.
They
They
have
have made
unstinted support
they have
to
made the
become Prime
victory
Minister.
possible.
But
No,
big-
and
So
one-
he
one
can't,
sec-
in a way, bite the hand that feeds.
Yeah, 1 second. In terms of the RSS, and here I'm agreeing with Ajoy, what I'd heard, thanks to reporters like yourselves and various other people reported from Gujarat, that basically under his reign in Gujarat, he handled the RSS very well. the
Sagarika,
RSS.
the other point which Shourie makes, and I think it is the most important point he makes, and I think it's it provides an insight to what his analysis of Modi is. He feels that as chief minister, Modi was successful with a particular approach,
Yeah, the projects,
which is
not
simply not
policy.
working
Right.
in India. You know, what I got from Shourie
a very good
through
point.
this interview is that he regards Modi as a bit of a Mufassal leader, and that he has not been able to make this transition.
He said he's good at projects.
Yeah.
He's not good at
Yeah.
policy.
I think a necessary condition for Modi to gain back the advantage is a major cabinet reshuffle.
I'm sure Prime Minister would think of calling him, sitting with him, he's talent that they could do with, but I don't necessarily
Bring
think
him into the government.
Why not?
Why not?
I think this is a government, I think this government above all needs to be much more tolerant of dissent.
I certainly don't see this government or Narendra Modi himself calling in Mr. Shourie. Mr. Shourie has burnt his bridges with this government.
You
He burnt
asked
his
what
bridges.
should they do?
But, if I was a government, and I understand, it is very justifiable for Narendra Modi to see this as a really scathing, no-holds-barred attack and mark, Arun Shourie, strike Arun Shourie's name out. But if I was clever, having struck him out personally,
I would get him into the government.
No. To look at the points he's raised.
We're going to have to leave it there. It's 1 year of the Modi government and the troubles are only increasing. And our panelists here are saying that either the government takes Mr. Shourie's criticism on board or it goes into an even messier future. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. That's it on Capital View. Lots more next week.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.